Hey friends, it's episode 139 of the Faith Fitness Joy podcast, and it is also the third episode of the Moving in Faith series, Money Mindset Reset. So last week I talked about what a walk in faith entails and to be prepared for being stripped of any and everything in the way of wherever God is taking you. And in some respects, today's topic follows that a bit. So today I am talking about money, specifically healing your relationship with money and why it's relevant when it comes to faith and growing in faith. So if you find yourself in a situation in which your faith is being tested, particularly as it might relate to money, then join me in today's episode of the Faith Fitness Joy podcast. Okay. Welcome, beautiful souls, to another fabulous episode of the Faith Fitness Joy podcast. Today is the third in our series on moving in faith, and I am your coach and host, Rochelle Renee. So before I dive in today, I just want to first thank all my subscribers to the YouTube channel and the podcast. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate you tuning in each week and just your support on the show and being subscribers. If you aren't already, please make sure you like, subscribe, and share the podcast and YouTube channel with friends and family or those that you think would really appreciate the show and benefit from all the things that we talk about here. I have a goal of reaching 10,000 subscribers, and I'm getting closer every day. I just crossed 2,000 subscribers earlier this week, and so I would love your help getting there. Beyond that, I am also on a mission through this podcast and my coaching programs, publications, and products to help as many other moms as possible find health, happiness, and healing. So help me spread the love by helping to share this podcast and my YouTube channel. So, all right, all that being said, welcome to today's episode. It is Wonderful Wednesday here on the Faith Fitness Joy podcast. And today we're continuing the Moving in Faith series. And once again, God is taking me in a bit of an unexpected direction with this series. And He asked me today to talk about money. Specifically, I am led to talk about how part of walking in faith and spiritual growth will require healing on many different levels within yourself. And as odd as it might seem on the surface, money is a huge part of this. And so for whatever reason, as I was kind of thinking about what to talk about today and asking God, where to take this series for this week, that is what He asked me to talk about. So before we kind of jump into that a little bit, I just want to recap what these different seasons of faith, journeys in faith, leaps of faith, whatever you want to call these different seasons we move through that seem to, serve to strengthen our faith. I wanted to kind of recap the things that have become evident to me that they serve, why we go through these, what purpose they have, because it's relevant to this topic today as well, and kind of everything that I'm talking about in this series. So the first thing is that it is for the growth and evolution of your soul. Second is to bring you closer to or in alignment with the life that you are destined for. 3 is refinement, right? That transformational process. And 4 is to lead you back to the truth of who you are, which is a spiritual being residing within a physical body in this world. So, and more importantly, a fractal of God, a piece of God living within your body. So a unique expression of God in this reality, in this world. So what does money have to do with all of this? Well, as I mentioned in the first episode, all of these different seasons in faith that I've been moving through, particularly in this past decade of my life, 3 areas of my life have been the most significantly impacted in these seasons. First of which has been finances. In fact, finances seems like it's not just always in the mix, but significantly impacted and comes into play quite a bit. But also relationships are another area that's been significantly impacted, as well as my own sense of self-worth and my relationship with myself. So kind of related to today's topic, reflecting back on these recent seasons that I've been moving through. In some sense, they're kind of one season, but in another respect, they're also their own different seasons because different things were like what pushed me into moving into these different seasons. So it was, not long after I made the decision to leave my lifelong home in California and move to a completely different state that I also started an inner healing journey. Now, this was not planned, and in hindsight, I don't know if I would have done those two things together. However, it's really just kind of how the timing worked out. And in hindsight, I can see that this was, exactly how God had intended it to be, or at least he was going to take the opportunity with me, embarking on this move to also kind of kick off my inner healing journey. So not long into my inner healing journey, money became a focal point of this work for me because money is very much tied to our sense of self-worth and also all of these aspects of your dominant thought paradigm, which all of us have, whether we are aware of them or not. So early into my inner healing journey, I learned that the vast majority of my behavior and the way that I operate in the world, in my life, in all facets of my life, were trauma responses. It was like, as I went deeper and deeper into it, I realized more and more like my whole personality, my whole way of thinking, my perception, it was all trauma responses. And I didn't know that. It was like, you don't know what you don't know kind of a thing. So naturally, I was oblivious to this until I started to become aware of it through doing the inner healing work and, reading and learning about what that looks like and following the process to, kind of peel back these layers of myself, I guess, and the different things that had happened that I was looking to change or looking to get at the root of, why were these things happening to me? So prior to all of that, I just kind of thought that that's how things were, that was my personality. I just had no idea, right? So when the inner healing work, like when I was doing that, meaning the various books I was reading, coaching programs I paid to get in, and was using to help me with that work, digital courses and products that I was, listening to and using to help me with my inner healing work. But when they intersected with money, I started learning that even my finances were tied to my past trauma and all the things that I had to process and heal as a result of like becoming aware of that and starting to realize that it's all connected. Everything in our outer reality is a product of our inner reality, including, money and how we feel towards it, how we act with it, how it shows up in our life, all of that. And I had never really thought about money on a deeper level at all prior to that. It was just, kind of it is what it is thing, I just thought that money was something that we need to survive and that you get it by working. You have to work to have money. I also believed that if you wanted more money, you had to work even harder. But that there was also like this limit, at least for me, like in my mind, it was like there was only so far you could get. I also had this belief that like really big wealth, like multiple millions of dollars or even, millionaire, anything above, multiple six figures just seemed completely out of reach. I had this belief that it was only available to certain types of people. And I was not one of those types of people. I also believed that it was okay to want to have more money, but just not too much. Like there was this invisible boundary in my mind, where it was like unreasonable beyond that. And if you cross that level, it was like you were getting into excess and you were being maybe greedy or gluttonous or something like that. And so all of this started to change when I was presented with the idea that not only is there more than enough money in the world, there is nothing keeping me from receiving whatever amount I want, or anyone else for that matter, other than what's in our own mind, other than our own beliefs and what we believe to be true. But so that's the first kind of thing, right? That alone is a big revelation if you can process that and you can sit with that and start to look at, okay, how can I change my beliefs around this? But it isn't as simple as just changing your mind. It's not just as simple as being like, oh, okay, so I can choose that I can receive any amount of money or income level that I want to. That's not enough in and of itself. You also have to believe that you can have it. And that's where this intersection with inner healing really is. That's where the two worlds kind of collide. Or the two areas collide when you start to get into sort of that area of realizing that you have to also believe that you can have like whatever that level of wealth that you want for yourself is. So for 2 years, I've been moving through one of the toughest and scariest seasons of my life. Over the course of this time, I've lost just about every cent I've ever earned in my life. Like I mentioned, it started with when I made the decision to move, and then the whole process of moving to this new state. But then there's been other things in the wake of that, and it's, obviously too much to get into all of it here, but you know, despite all of this planning that I did and saving, and like I had made the decision to move at least a year and a half before I actually like set things into motion to actually do it. And that included saving and saving and saving and saving as much as I could. It included looking at anything that I was spending money on, wherever my bills were going, and like cutting things where I could, selling stuff that I own, like all of that stuff. And I was just trying to like accumulate what I could to build a good savings and cushion to be able to afford the move. And all these different other aspects, planning, started to look for jobs as soon as I had made the decision, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to stay in the job I was in if I moved out of the state. I had to be a resident of California to remain in that job. So it's like despite all of that planning and despite, doing all of these things to really be as prepared as I could, it didn't really matter. In the end, I can see now, I guess, that it never really, nothing would have prepared or prevented some of what ended up happening because it was necessary. And then after that, the sort of second season in this 2-year window of time was when I ventured into self-employment with my business. So I don't know what the opposite of the Midas touch is. Like, I don't know if there's a word for that, but it felt like I had that. Nothing seemed to work. I sent resume after resume after resume into void upon void upon void. I mean, most of the time I didn't hear anything back. If I did hear anything back, it was like, well, you meet all the qualifications and that's great, but we're going to go with a different candidate, or we're going to take another route. Like sometimes they would say some weird, vague thing like that. That's like, what does that even mean? So there was that. And then when I did find another job, which was quite a while after we got here, so there was this whole period of just, absolute fear, stress, all that stuff before that. Then I ended up getting a job that was roughly a 50% pay cut from my prior job. So it was like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like you're thirsty and somebody gives you like 2 ounces of water after you haven't had any water for like a week or something. I don't know. It was just like it was better than nothing, but it it was still, it wasn't going to cover bills. It wasn't cutting it and all of that. And then when it came to my business, it seemed like it was more of the same. I invested in coaches. I read books. I studied all these things I could find. I did e-courses, master classes, you name it. I like poured into it, to try to learn as much as I could to, do all this training and figure out all these different things, what other people have learned, what are recommendations, practices that work, all this stuff. And I did all the things to no avail. Like it just, nothing I was trying was working. It was just like I said, it just, the more the time went on and that it kept happening, the more I was getting this feeling of like, I have like whatever the opposite of the Midas touch is or whatever. It was just really, it was very challenging, very difficult on many levels, as you might imagine. The accounts kept shrinking. I had many moments of terror and despair. I cried myself to sleep many nights. I questioned myself. I questioned my intuition. I questioned God at times. Like, why had he called me to do this? And then it wasn't working. Like it was just there was just so many moments, and I went through this whole um another dark night of the soul for the second time through my inner healing journey that I've been on. That one was particularly tough. And so just moving through all this stuff, right? And so while I went through all of this, I never turned away from God. I never like doubted God. I never, had one of those like Bruce Almighty moments where it was like, why me, God? Kind of, it wasn't, I never got into that space. It was like I still had this faith. I still had this level of trust and surrender because I did know, even though I had these moments of questioning, deep down I knew, like, no, I know he was giving me the signs. I know he was nudging me to do this. I know I was called out of my job, and he led me to do this. So it's like I don't know what the reasoning is. I don't totally understand what's going on, but I trust God. And so I continued to have that through all of this. And even though I was experiencing all these challenges and I was having like month to month to month, it was like, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to make this work? What am I going to do? Somehow it worked out every month. Like these weird, random little things would happen and somehow it would work out. And somehow I would, we would be okay. And the next month, I'd proceed and go on. So it was like, while these other things were happening and I was having these experiences of being frustrated and going through all these like scary times with it, at the same time, God was still providing and supporting and all of that. But he was also, there was times where he was also really quiet. And I have come to understand that part of that was because of it was just that part of the journey for me to have to learn. And where he was leading me to, rely more on my intuition, and going within myself. So I knew there had to be a reason for all this, even if I didn't understand what that reason was. And the rest of this story is very much still unfolding for me. But one thing has become very clear, and that is that God stripped everything away and brought me to literally to the brink, to the very edge of my limits, to neutralize my relationship with money. Like that is like where I had gotten to. Surrender isn't even a strong enough word for what I experienced. Like this place that I got to in these recent months of just, it was like, I don't know how like I said, there's not a good word for it. All I can tell you is I got to the deepest level of surrender that I've ever been at. I got to where it was like, all right, God, like you're just going to have to keep driving the car and I'm just going to sit here, like, because I'm not even qualified to look at the map and tell us where to turn at this point. I just have to like roll with this the best I can. So, and like I said, I realize now that some of that was because of me too, because of my resistance to this whole process. And it was a matter of, I reached that level of surrender to where he could finally intervene, to where I was finally willing to be like, to fully, completely surrender to him, and let him figure it out and take care of all of it. So it was this reset, and it was so much deeper than just being a reset. All of that money that I had saved over the course of my 20-year career and all the things that I accrued over these past decades, material things, relationships, even clothes, I mean, everything was created from a version of me that no longer exists. That version of me is gone. And it was also a version of me that was driven more by my flesh and the world, right? Which a lot of us are. That's part of this journey of life, right? That part of why we're here is to shift from that, kind of flesh driven way of being into tuning into our spirit more and allowing ourselves to be led more by our spirit. And that is a process. So the other aspects of that was that I had money on a pedestal. I didn't really realize that. I didn't even really think I thought that much about money, but in many respects, it was like it was on this pedestal. I had a lot of false values attached to it. And so and a lot of us do, right? Like if you think about two different amounts of money, right? We have a very different feeling and a very different belief and a very different value attributed to say like $3,000 versus say $3 million, right? But really they're just two different numbers with different zeros behind them. They're neutral because they're energy, but that's a whole other thing. So that was part of it, was kind of getting to this place of where it was all being neutralized. And I had to shift from being so driven about the flesh and the world and all these beliefs that I had about money and the values I had attached to money, that to get to where I could see money for what it truly is, which is a resource that's available to us in abundance from the source of all that there was, is, and ever will be, God, right? It all comes from God. So in that respect, it's infinite. And infinite amounts are available to us. It's a matter of tapping into that spiritual side of it and the connection with God and all of that. And that's a whole other topic as well. And this is still very much something I'm moving through and learning at this point in time. So I've spent over 2 years doing all of this work. I'm still doing the work, but I do know in my spirit that I've completed sort of the hardest part of this climb, at least with respect to this part of my path. There's nothing left for me to process or examine or heal, at least not at this level of intensity of what I've just come through, and that I've experienced over these past 2 years. And I now understand that I had to go through all of this in order to be able to really neutralize my relationship with money. And I had to neutralize my relationship with money in order to head into where I'm heading now. And I think no matter who it is, when you're going for certain, big goals, and you've made this decision to take a leap of faith toward those big dreams and those things you really want for yourself, you're going to have to go through something like this. And that's because of all of these different feelings, beliefs, stories that we have around money. Money, specifically our mindset around money, is a huge part of our inner healing work in general. I mean, it kind of makes sense when you think about it. And especially like if you're in the midst of doing this work, or you've been doing this work, like you understand why that is. But if you're kind of at the beginning of it, it might not be as clear yet. But money is a huge part of our lives, obviously, right? We can't live without it. You have to have money to, be able to have a place to live and to buy food and all that stuff. Yet many of us don't really have the greatest relationship with money. And our relationship with money affects when and how God will bless us. And it's not because God is like stepping back, like, I'm not going to give you this until you get it together, kind of a thing. It's more like he knows that without addressing these underlying things and doing this deeper work, we won't hold on to that blessing. We won't be able to hold on to the abundance, because the same stuff that's keeping us from it is still there. And until we address it and clear it and alchemize it, then it won't change. So we have to get to a place where we're prepared for it. And again, that has to do with our conditioning around money, and also our conditioning around people who have money and beliefs around money. I mean, you listen to the way we hear people talk about money and some of these things. It's just, it becomes more evident when you really start to pay attention to it. So some examples, right? Beliefs about money, like a lack mentality. A lot of us have lack mentality. I know I did for a long time. I'm neutralized. Like, so I'm in this like reset space where I'm kind of like, I don't know what you call it. I've neutralized the lack mentality. Let's put it that way. But it takes a lot. It took a lot for me anyway to get there. It might not take that much for everybody, but that was one thing I've learned from all this. A lot of us might view money negatively, so that we're afraid of it, right? We think it's evil. We think it's bad. We think it's wrong. So I'll give you some examples of some common limiting beliefs or things that people say about money or people with money, and see if this, starts to wake something up with you. Money doesn't grow on trees. Money is evil. We can't afford that. Rich people are greedy. I don't care about money. All they care about is money. Nobody should have that big of a house. Nobody should have that kind of car. Nobody needs that many cars. As soon as I get money, something takes it away. I just can't get ahead. if I get wealthy, people won't like me anymore, and on and on and on. So does any of that sound familiar? Have you heard any of these before? Have you said any of these before? Maybe all of them sound familiar. But the thing is, none of these things are true. None of these things are like absolute truths. None of them are written in stone. They're just things that we have come to believe. And most of these things are things we believe, and we walk around believing and operating from these beliefs, and they aren't even ours. They were given to us by like our parents, our grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, movies, music, whatever. So again, but none of them are truth. The other thing is that we also will have these unhealthy or limiting emotions and feelings about money. So that can be like guilt and shame around money. So we might feel guilty for wanting to be multimillionaires. We might feel guilty for wanting to have a certain kind of car, or feel guilty for wanting certain, I don't know, types of clothes or whatever it might be. So we have this guilt or this shame around money. Sometimes we might feel guilty or shameful if we come into some sort of money. I remember this happened to me last summer. I manifested a large amount of money, largest amount of money I've ever manifested in my life. And I remember, like, as soon as I started, like as soon as I got it, it was the weirdest, hardest to describe. It was like this pit of my stomach, guilt and shame feeling. Like almost like you're looking around to see if anyone sees or something. It was so bizarre. And I had to sit with that and dig into it, and come to find out it had to do with like what I had manifested the money for. And it was like irresponsible based on the way I was raised and the beliefs that I was raised with around money. And so that's why I was feeling all this guilt and shame. So that's another thing that happens. Another thing is obsession about money and material things. So we see people go the other end of the extreme, or the other end of the spectrum, where it's like they're obsessed about it. They want to keep up with the Joneses. They want to have what other people have. I've heard stories of people like spending their rent to buy like some type of purse because they want to have that kind of purse. You hear stories of people like buying some super expensive dress to wear to an event, and then they take it back. And then like just stuff like this, because again, it's like you're trying to uphold a certain image, or there's this obsession about having a certain amount of money, or appearing that you have a certain amount of money. And then another thing that happens is we hold and cling to our worldly possessions. And this is tricky because it's hard not to. This is something I was confronted with this recent season of like, I had to even like accept and surrender the possibility of losing my house and my car, everything. I got to a place where it was like, okay, if that's what's going to happen, I'm trusting you, God, that there's a reason like that. And that's where I had to get to. But my clinging to it like that was creating all this resistance, and it was just making everything a lot more difficult and more painful. But that's another thing that we do, is we hold too tightly, and we put too much on our worldly possessions, so that we won't move. We won't move in faith because we let the fear get too big. And this is, like I said, this is tricky, because this is freaking hard. This last one is really like, it is very challenging. And I feel like I don't hear a lot of people that talk about money like talk about this much, if at all. And that was another reason that I feel like I was led to talk about this today and do the episode on this topic. Because I feel like what I've seen anyway is like a lot of people, it's like they talk about like, you know, their success and how they've acquired wealth or whatever. And it's like they'll talk about maybe where there was moments where it was hard, but they don't really go into whether they experienced these types of things. And I don't know if it's just like a don't speak it into existence type of a thing, or it's an appearance, whatever it is. I just feel like it's important to be honest about it and transparent about it, because I feel like a lot of people, like myself included, having been out there trying to learn about this and navigate being self-employed and the concept of manifestation and changing your mindset. And a lot of the people that are out there talking about it, there's sort of this picture that gets painted, that it's just, so easy, and if you aren't like in this sunshine and rainbows vibe all the time, then that's it, you're just not getting it, and it's not that simple. And like I said, so everything I've talked about so far is just all these different layers and things you have to move through and really process and clear and heal. The other thing I think that I've taken away from that is the importance of maintaining a close relationship with God through all of this, because like I said, it ultimately comes from God. Yes, we have the ability to co-create, i.e. manifest, but that power is his. It comes from God through us. So it's not like it's not all on you, and it's not anything like you are doing by yourself. And so I feel like it's really important to emphasize that and underscore that all of it's for naught if you're not staying connected with God and connecting with him daily to keep yourself on the right path, to make sure that you're not veering in the wrong direction, or perhaps falling back into some of these old traps that we have with our mentality and mindset around money. Because ultimately, all of these things, they get in the way, and they're the things that are holding you back. And if you don't address them and do this inner work and heal them, they're going to lead you to self-sabotage or somehow fumble your blessings if and when you receive them, right? So like if God were to bless you before you've done any of this work, before you've become aware of all this stuff, the same things that have led you to not necessarily having the level of abundance or wealth that you might want right now will lead you to losing it, because you don't have that awareness around it. So it has to be addressed. It has to come to surface. You have to work through it and get to this place where you are neutralizing that relationship with money, because ultimately God wants you to be abundant. He wants you to be taken care of. He wants you to feel safe and supported. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like I think of God as like a parent, right? And no parent wants their child to not have what they need and to suffer and all of that, but at the same time, we have free will, and we have the free will to either look within and figure out what is going on within us or not. And he will always meet you where you are, but he's also always going to honor free will and respect free will. So through your free will, you have to move through this stuff and look at it and do the work to change it and heal it and neutralize it, but he will help you along the way and support you through that process. And it's all the process of learning to allow for it, learning to allow yourself to receive it, learning to allow yourself to have it, and learning to trust that God will provide it. But it's crazy all the different ways that we will reject it and push it away, because while we might want the wealth and the success and the happiness, we also, well, a lot of us have these past traumas and these stories of the bottom dropping out, of abandonment, of heartbreak, whatever it may be. We all have our little collection of them. And they tell us these stories, these past stories tell us like, oh, it's not safe. It's not going to work out. Something's going to go wrong. Something's going to happen. And then that leads us to self-sabotaging and creating these circumstances in our outer reality on a subconscious level that will undermine our blessings and our abundance if we don't do the work to become aware of that underlying thought paradigm. So like I said, all these kinds of crazy things come up the more you do this work and the more of these layers that you peel back. There's a saying, new level, new devil, and it's so true, because like you get to that next level and then this panic hits you. It's like you have this moment of like, oh, okay, I made it. I got to the next level. I got through that. I cleared all that stuff. And then something comes in, some new success, some new win, a new breakthrough, whatever. And then this panic hits you again. Like, oh, it's too good to be true. No, something's going to screw it up. Something bad's going to happen. This can't be good. Like, I mean, I can't, because there's like this underlying thing, this belief of like, something has to be bad if you have something good. And that's not true. And again, it's all a process of unpacking all of this and neutralizing it and alchemizing it so that you can start to receive the good things and start to receive the blessings and the better. But a lot of it is tied up in the trauma, because a lot of those beliefs are trauma responses. And so that's it. Those are the things that pop up when something's going good because you're so used to them not. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, it was a bit of it's a dense topic. Um, but God led me to talk about it. And I think part of that is because I know there may be a lot of other people experiencing this right now, feeling, very similar to some of the things that I've shared in this episode today. So if this does resonate for you, I pray that it will bring you some reassurance that it is just part of the process and help you give you that reassurance to trust the process and keep going, keep doing the work and trust that it will work out. God will make a way for you. He will make sure that you have what you need, and His grace will fill the gaps as you're navigating all of this. Um, it can be scary and it can be really difficult, but I just hope that, my sharing some of this will reassure you and give you that second wind you might need, depending on where you are in your path. It's not being stripped away to punish you or because it's true that it can't work for you. It is a reset. It's happening for you. It's happening for your benefit. It's happening to neutralize your relationship with money and the material world. It's kind of like one of those pictures where, those, I don't know if they make them anymore, but they used to have these books and you'd stare at this picture and it would look like a bunch of fish or something. And you stare at it long enough and then you're supposed to see like a sailboat. And or some image, something like that. You'd look at an image that looked like, a whole bunch of the same thing. And then if you're supposed to stare at it and you see something different. But it's not until you relax your eyes and stop trying to see the image that you can finally see it. And then it snaps into focus and it's super clear. And then you can't unsee it. Like you look at that picture and it's there immediately. And so it's very similar. It's like this whole process is God's way of resetting your vision so that you can see through the Spirit, so that you can move through the Spirit and start to see through faith. It's like different eyes. It's like He's bringing the part of the Bible up. If you have eyes to see and ears to hear, it's like that's what it's referring to. It's like in the Spirit. And so this is just part of sort of he's saying like restorative factory setting. So it's like taking away all this conditioning of the world and all the things that we're taught as we grow up in the world that tell us all this stuff and get us really immersed in the physical reality and the 3D and all of these rules and things that we think we have to that we think are true when they're not. So that's what this process is all about. And that's what he wanted me to talk to you about today. I do hope that this blesses those of you that needed to receive this, that are, moving through something like this. Maybe you're experiencing your own journey in self-employment. Maybe you're experiencing something else where perhaps you've been laid off, or perhaps you're feeling led to leave your job and it feels crazy because you can't fathom how you're going to make ends meet. You can't fathom what that's going to look like with regard to the money. But I know in my case, a lot of this for me had to do with God leading me down this path to heal and neutralize my relationship with money, and to show me that it doesn't really matter what's happening in the outer reality or what the world says it has to be like. At the end of the day, God is not limited by anything. We limit ourselves with our minds and the way we think. And when we start to unpack that and we have that willingness to be honest with ourselves and openness to really look at it and lean in and be like, okay, I'm willing to see this and I'm willing to do what I need to do to change it. Everything else can shift and God can move in miraculous ways in your life, but it's a two-way thing. You have to meet him halfway. So I hope that helps for those that need it. And that concludes today's episode of the Faith, Fitness, Joy podcast. I would love to hear from you, so please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you find this helpful and you want to continue the pursuit of faith, fitness, and joy with me, please like and subscribe. And of course, you can find Faith, Fitness, Joy on all socials. And I look forward to seeing you in next week's episode. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. And thank you so much for tuning in today.